Hey, welcome back, everybody. Here we are, Penny. Season four,
It
epi-
is.
episode one. If it is March or April, then that itch begins that we need to start a new series of discussions, not only between ourselves, but with some of our favorite educators and writers. And so here we are a year later. I think all 4 years we started this time of year, right?
Well, the very first year was the year we shut down. We called it Co-Surviving the Pandemic. So it was 2020, and that meant it was probably, I want to say March 20th ish. So this is a little later. I think we kind of got a later start, but just quickly, in case people are wondering, this is where they all are in one spot. Lots of conversations. They go all the way back to that first convo where we were both kind of shell-shocked trying to figure out, nice look on that first slide there, trying to figure out how we were going to get through. And we've interviewed just so many amazing people. And then I will start the new ones. So when you open it up, you see what's on.
Yeah, and I think we should mention, I think when we first started, we tried to do one every day, 5 days a week. And both of us have commitments in the next few weeks. And so we're going to post probably a couple a week, maybe more, maybe less, just depending on, our schedules. We just don't want to feel pressured and married to the idea that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we'll let you know when new ones come out. But we're looking forward to it. We have a confirmed lineup already of a lot of really interesting people.
I would agree. We've got some very cool people coming on. They're just so generous with their time. But we're going to start off by talking about ourselves as readers and writers, right?
Yeah. So what's on your reading radar?
So most recently, I started this a few days ago. Padraig Otwama, and if you don't know him, he's the host of the On Being podcast. Krista Tippett runs On Being as a podcast, but he has this section called Poetry Unbound. And this is 50 poems to open your world. Every single one of them has led me to writing. But the thing I love about his book is he gives you a little introduction of why he chose the poem. Then after the poem, you have about usually 3 or 4 pages of his commentary on why he chose the poem. What are the moves the writers make in the poem? And for example, yesterday I read one that's called Let, and it's based on Genesis. I think it might even be called Genesis. I should look it up, but the repeating phrase is let, and it's used like let there be light, and there was light, but the idea of the invitation of let something. And what I started writing next to it was, what if it were written for teachers, and what kinds of things would we want them to say? Let there be joy in reading. Let there be kind of expansive thinking around lesson planning. Let there be students centered. Let there be words of gratitude. Thank you for this class today. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for caring about making this space beautiful. As I was writing these in a list, I kept thinking about all of the things teachers are struggling with behavior. How do we make those kinds of invitations possible? So that's one thing I've been reading.
Well, I would say 2 things come to mind. Number one, when I hear you, is I love these conversations because they're unrehearsed. And
You didn't know about this book.
I've been in a 3-minute conversation with you right now, and there's a book that I want to read. And that's what I just love. I think when we talked earlier, before we even started any of these, we were just having conversations like this, and we just kind of stumbled across the idea there's a value for other people to hear teachers talk about books and writing.
Yeah.
My second thought when I hear that is this idea that the poem and then followed by why he picked it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I don't know because I haven't seen or read the book, I'm wondering if that would be a model for students, like to pick a poem and look at some of those reflections as mentor texts.
I was thinking immediately of Linda Reef's Whispering in the Wind, because her book does that. Her students had poetry notebooks, and they chose a poem and reflected on why it mattered to them, along with some art. And they did a different entry each month. It's a fabulous book. Not enough people know about her most recent. But yeah,
The art in that book is incredible.
Yeah,
The
it is
student art
beautiful.
is incredible.
But two others, I've got so many that I'm currently reading, but I don't know if you remember Daniel Willingham's Why Kids Don't Like School. Now he's done The Reading Mind, a cognitive approach to understanding how the mind reads. And this is another one a bit like Marianne Wolf, where I'm having to reread and stumbling a little, but man, am I learning a ton about reading.
Yep.
And then I was in an airport. Do you ever buy Lampman's Quarterly?
No.
Oh my gosh, this is such a sophisticated journal. And this one begins with an essay by Paul Tough, who we've quoted many times in our work. But this is honestly the history of education across the world, with so many essays and really fascinating things that you'll learn about other cultures and what they are doing with education, not just ours. So across time, and I don't know, absolutely fabulous. I have so many pages turned down to go back to.
I'm laughing because that Willingham book, I've read it like 5 times because I'm working on the idea of prior knowledge and the importance of prior knowledge. And that book really, really zeroes in on that idea. He's brilliant. And, you know, and like you, I had to stumble over and over. That's why I read it 4 or 5 times, because trying to grasp certain things. But I also think that he has this uncanny ability to explain difficult things in ways that laymen can understand them, that I think is really, really rich.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to read this one too then, because this is new. So it's definitely taking those ideas from Why Kids Don't Like School too.
No, I'm actually talking about the book you showed.
Oh, you are this one.
I have it's somewhere on my desk. I don't want to dig it out while we're live, but I find it remarkable. Really, it was very helpful in some of the things that I've been writing.
So what have you been reading?
Well, if we want to start on the lighter escapism side, as you know, one of my favorite genres is sort of crime. And I have to show it on my Kindle, but Harlan Coben is one of my, there's certain writers that come out with a book a year, you know, Harlan Coben, Michael Connolly, Don
Lincoln
Winslow.
Lawyer guy.
Yeah. So I love Harlan Coben, and he has this book called I Will Find You. It is complete brainless escapism. It's really written well. I would say this, there's a plot point early that I found completely implausible, and so I had to swallow that to finish the book. But I didn't care, because I just wanted a diversion from some of the other things that were going on in the world. And once I sort of accepted that, then I was pretty good with that. Professionally, the last professional book I've read was well, that's printed. I've read a couple preview copies, what we're going to get into in later episodes. But Jeff Wilhelm, Mike Smith, Hugh Kesson, and Deborah Appelman have combined to write this book called Fighting Fake News. And this is something I've been kind of writing about a little bit, because this idea, I don't know, I want to say that reading is different than it was 5 years ago. When you have when I say reading, I mean like not just books, but reading the world, reading news, reading video. Now we have deep fake videos. We have Chat GPT. We don't even know if it's written by a human. And this world of information pollution that they talk about. And, you know, and part of it, like, you know, like this section here, we all believe and we all spread information pollution, you know, and it's not just the left, or it's not just the right, but we're all guilty of it. And kind of from an academic point of view, gets into why that is. And then I think they transition into how might we teach kids to be more critical consumers. And I just think it's time. I don't know. I think you and I have talked about this privately, but I think it's time for like a mandated media studies class in all high schools, maybe even middle schools, you know.
Really reminds me, Kelly, of Forged by Reading, Kylene and Bob's most recent book, which was so focused on that whole idea of the proliferation of fake news. So it would be an interesting one to look at in contrast to that one, or in
Yeah, that's a
parallel.
really, really good book as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Is really our job to make to enable kids to identify the central theme of Romeo and Juliet, or is our central idea as teachers to get kids to be able to read critically once they leave high school, once they leave middle
Mm.
school? I just think sometimes I just have this feeling, that the schools are always behind the shifts in society. But I just think we're entering an age where you're not going to know what's real unless you know how to read it critically.
It's interesting to me that we have this conversation when I just finished my recommendations for finalists for Book Love Foundation grants with my partner, Donalyn Miller. And what we saw are so many young teachers, second, third year teachers, who are just going for it with book clubs and independent reading, and really trying to populate their shelves with perspectives from around the world, and how important it is right now that we support teachers who are doing the hard work of looking beyond what is often mandated curriculum to engage kids, because the lack of engagement in school is real. And I just send out such appreciation to every teacher who listens, because it is in many, many places a daily battle to get kids to respect each other and to be in the classroom and to keep trying. So,
It's interesting because on the writing side of that, trying to keep writers interested, yesterday I had a conversation with one of our mentors and editor, Tom Newkirk, and he Tom, he always has these little phrases that it's about things you've thought about a million times, but just a slightly different tweak on that, and he said some writing is authored and some writing is assembled, right? And I just, that idea that if you give kids things they want to write about, if you give them agency, if you give them decision-making space, we want to build kids who would rather write their own memoir than have a computer do it, right? So this idea of a piece that's just assembled is not, is where I'm afraid, things have been and where there might even be going.
Well, it's funny when we talk about Chat GPT, and I listened to the podcast you sent from Seth Godin, that, so often what people see it as a shortcut to do the writing no one wants to do. And that I agree with. It can be used for that if it's used accurately. But what we're not facing is how much of the time are kids asked to produce writing they don't have any interest in creating. And then they're assembling for a set of criteria that never expresses, right, what their most, I don't know, that desire to share, desire to be. So it would be very appropriate at this point here, partway through, to talk about, what are you writing? What is in your notebook? What kinds of, don't you balance it between what do I have to write versus what do I really want to write?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, and as you know, I've been writing about prior knowledge. I'm hesitant yet to call this a book that's coming, but I have been writing about prior knowledge. But, in preparation for today, I kind of went back and was looking in my notebook of things that I've been writing about recently. And one of them was in Michigan, I heard Bob and Kylene speak. And again, this is like saying something we already know, but in a slightly different way. I really thought it was interesting. I wrote this down in my notebook, that Bob Probst said that some of the best reading occurs when you are not reading. And I had to sit with that quote, right? It's when you have ingested something and you sit, and this comes back to the prior knowledge things. It's now I have time to stare at the ceiling and think about this idea, and it's that mulling over, stepping actually away from the page and having time to mull it over, that I think is really, really interesting. And I think it's very related to what you already know, what you already don't know. And I don't know, I wrote next to that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think that is directly related to how all of us write. You write something and you step away, and it, as Marie always said, continues to work on you. I take my dogs for a walk, and all of a sudden I'm going, wait a minute, I think I want to do this. Or maybe I want to say more about that. The processes are so interconnected, what we do as readers and what we do as writers.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I have been so inspired always by everything Ross Gay writes. So first, the Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, which was a New York Times finalist, a book of poetry. I have so many pages turned down and reread. And then he wrote the Book of Delights, which is a collection of these short little essays. And I can remember running into people, like some of the essays are this long. And I would run into people and find out they were reading Ross Gay, and I'd be like, oh, we got to talk. But this is his brand new book, which I got at my local independent signed. But it's called Inciting Joy, and the essays themselves are called incitements. So it will say something like, through my tears, I saw death, the second incitement. So what incites you to write? And I have all of these things underlined, which is unusual for me because I don't usually write in my books. But what I found was Ross Gay opened up a way to think about essay writing, which is he is particularly good at footnotes that take you like in another direction. And he's really good at the kind of rambling way we think. And it feels like these are all rough drafts, and they clearly aren't, because he's just so good with language. But I wrote down, here's one of his footnotes. So he says, he reads this tweet and he says, my first response was kind of self-protective or defensive. It hurt my feelings, I'm saying, though I know I shouldn't say so. I was like, hand on chest, ouch, my heart. And my second response, sympathetic to the heartbreak and rage from which that tweet was launched, was the same, ouch, my heart. But the footnote is next to launched. And under the, at the bottom of the page, it says, are tweets launched? I understand too, or at least I get the impression, have heard that tweets are often discharged like machine gun fire, that there is not always the same kind of revised, refined, contemplative, considered comportment of something like, well, what you're currently reading. I get that. Right? And so now, as I often do when I'm reading all between fall semester and the next, I'm writing down, this is going to be one of the expectations in the essays kids write this fall. They're going to include footnotes that take you away and offer some kind of an aside that says, there's more to say here, but it doesn't really belong in the central body of the text, which no little plug here, but Micromentor text behind me.
I was about to say it.
It's
so I enjoyed reading your footnotes in Micromentor text. And actually, I think what you're saying here is exactly what Bob said, right? Is that you're reading this, but you're thinking, it leads you to this thinking and so as a writer, and the thing I've been writing, I've been using a lot of footnotes as well. Because I've been reading a couple different writers who have been doing that.
Well, and I think what is interesting about Gay's footnotes is that I was really pretty constrained in Micromentor text. Like I thought I was breaking the rules to include them at all. And especially to say things like, this book is so beautiful, you just have to have it, which isn't a footnote to the content necessarily, more like an aside. And then I read his, and he has parts where they go on for 4 or 5 pages, the footnote. So now you're into what is a footnote, right? I want my kids to explore that.
And sometimes you find the footnote more fascinating than the paragraph in which it originated.
Well, it isn't, and I don't know that I would say more, but I would say it is fascinating and important. So at any rate, that led me to, I started with big subjects like he uses, these big subjects, and then started really digging in. And one of them went on for 5 pages, and I started looking up in my thesaurus other ways to use a word. And the word that I was focused on was disintegration. When something happens and the entire relationship is disintegrated, right? And I have this long, and then I researched all these other things about all kinds of, from Plato to John Stuart Mill to Piaget. I mean, just like, it's crazy. But I ended up writing in my notebook, this essay draft is becoming Ross-like, tangled, full of diversions. And now I'm even more interested in the subject. Do we think about that the more of a mess it becomes, maybe it increases our engagement in our own thinking? And I have not written it as an essay. I've written it as a series of drafts and ideas. And I love that about his work. It's like an invitation to start mucking around.
Well, and perhaps we just jumped this without even talking about it. But as we said in 4 Essential Studies, you know, an essay is often an exploration of your thinking, right? Essay is not a thesis statement with 3 reasons. An essay means to explore and to think. And I love the idea that the more you write and dive into it, the more tentacles that it has that you might think about going down. Right?
And then what to do with those? Do they become their own essays, or do they become footnotes? Or I loved also Essay Camp, which is a Summer Brennan thing that she sends you via email. It's a 5-day camp. And then she writes about what essays are and do. And I loved the beginning, middle, end. She wrote it like this: the beginning draws you in, the middle holds your interest, and the ending sees you out again with a sense of closure. No matter the form, she gives you all kinds of ideas on form, but no matter the form, it has to have those 3 feelings to it.
What was the source for that again?
This is Summer Brennan, and these will all be on the Padlet, but she does this thing called Essay Camp, and it actually has a hashtag on Twitter and lots of followers, and people join it and just try their own.
You know, before we wrote books together, we each wrote books on our own. And, you know, sometimes I would write a chapter and it would be short, like it would be too thin. And as a beginning writer, I would worry. But just yesterday, I have this chapter I'm working on and it's too thin. And I don't worry, because what I'm going to do is just keep rereading it. And every time I read it, it sparks, use the same metaphor, tentacle. It sparks an avenue of where I can go with it, right? It's malleable.
Yeah, I just want to say that using the word chapter sounds like you're writing a book, even though you want to say, oh, it's not a book.
Well, look at that. We've hit our allotted time. We try not to go too long on these, so we make them bite-sized. But oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. I don't know if you've had anything else. I didn't want to cut you off. If you had anything else you wanted to.
No, that was it. What are we reading and writing and thinking about as we head into now this is April, is Arab American Heritage Month. And tomorrow we have 2 of our favorite Arab American educators coming on to talk about it. And I'm so excited to talk to them.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
I just have to say that that just sitting and chatting with you fires me up, you know? So as a teacher, it just is, it's a testament to getting out of your silo and finding like-minded people, because the job is so damn hard, right? To finding like-minded people and having conversations like this. So I appreciate you, Penny, and I appreciate being back in this loop. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you again tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Kelly. Great to talk with you.